Twinkle, twinkle, little star.
He's alive!
Welcome to Where the Weird Ones Are.
Every time I speak, I want the truth to come out.
Powerful figures in Hollywood as well as powerful politicians who are in fact not human. They're reptiles or they're lizards or perhaps extraterrestrials.
I don't think it is a human. I think it's a Sasquatch.
Go ahead and run. Run home and cry to mama.
Let's get weird.
What's up, you fucking weirdos? Welcome to another episode of Where the Weird Ones Are. My name is Kevin, but you probably already knew that, and if you didn't, now you do. Today's episode is a bonus. It is with Aleksandar Petakov. He is a Bigfoot researcher and filmmaker. He is best known for his YouTube series, episodic series, Bigfoot Beyond The Trail. I highly recommend it. Me and my kids are actually really loving it. We've been watching it for a couple weeks now. And yeah, it's pretty fun. But anyways, so he comes on and he tells, some interesting stories and experiences he has out on, trails and some of these expeditions that he's been on and has been a part of. He's also a fellow New Englander, which I love that. I didn't know that prior to asking him to come on. I just loved his content. So, and then literally, I think like the day before, I was watching a video, one of his episodes, and he said back home in New Hampshire, and I was just like, what? He lives in New Hampshire? But he's out there in he's out there in the wilderness. So, but I will say, I hope that this is okay for you guys to listen to, because my microphone, for some reason, well, I know the reason now, but at the time I didn't understand what was going on. Both this microphone and my brand new one, that I feel like it comes in way too hot, and my new microphone picks up everything. So I'm like literally every little noise that I make, it freaking grabs it. Which I got to figure out how to fix that. And here comes Rizzo right now as we speak. What's up, Rizzo? Yeah, I get it. You want to hang out, but your bed is downstairs. Anyways, so what I ended up doing was I recorded this episode using the microphone on my camera. So my voice isn't as crisp as this microphone. So I hope it's, okay for you all to listen to, because it was a great conversation. I really enjoyed it, and I'm definitely gonna have Alex on again eventually, because he's just so busy all the time. He just came back from Alaska not too long ago on an expedition. So I'm sure there's going to be more encounters that he can tell. And maybe we can get a little more of an inside scoop on the behind the scenes of his episodes and stuff. But yeah, no, he's a fantastic guy, super friendly. I enjoyed conversating with him, and I hope you all enjoy this episode as well, and I hope you check out his content. He is with Small Town Monsters, so also show them some love too for their projects. But yeah, so that's that in a nutshell. So if you want to be featured on the show, talk about your encounter stories, talk about conspiracies, spirituality, all the weird shit, I'm definitely down for that conversation. So hit up the email. It is wheretheweirdonesiare@gmail.com. Also, you can get me on Instagram, where_the_weirdonesiare. I'm most active on Instagram, so you definitely can reach me there. Also on Facebook, Where the Weird Ones Are, so don't be afraid to shoot me a message. Also, the best way, actually a few good ways, if you're interested in supporting the show and what I do, like, follow, share, and subscribe. That is the best way. Also, a really good way is to leave a rating or leave a comment, leave a review. However you feel, it can be, you can talk shit, you can say positive things, whatever, just whatever your heart desires. And that's what I want you to do. So if you don't feel like doing any of that, that's completely fine too. I don't mind. Also, another way to support this show is to buy some merch. So that's www.etsy.com/shop/where-the-weird-ones-are, and the link is in every episode. So if you can just click on that. So that's no big deal. Couple shout outs here. 1-0 podcast. I will fucking shout her out until I'm blue in the face, because she's amazing, and I love her, and I love what she does, and I love David, and I love everything that he does, and together, they're amazing. It's like the A-team. Who else? Mrs. Spooky Obsessed. I will never stop shouting her out randomly too, because her podcast is amazing, and she's an amazing friend. I really love her as well. Pharaoh, the Conversation Cabin, go check her out if you haven't yet. The Tipsy Ghost, I actually really like that episode. Podcast. TC, Tommy Cullum, Let's Get Freaky. If you haven't listened to him, I'll go do it. Okay? Because he's a good shit. Go check out 305 Black Smoke Paranormal on YouTube. They got some amazing shit as well. Also, my buddy Joe's podcast, Flow Weirda. You should go check that podcast out. Joe's a good dude, and his content's pretty great. I enjoy listening to it as well. So, question everything and stay weird.
They're coming to get you, Barbara.
Let's get weird. Let's get weird. Let's get weird. Let's get weird. Weird. Get weird.
So, I just watching one of your shows, one of your episodes the other day, and you had mentioned something about going home to New Hampshire. So my first question is, are you originally from New Hampshire?
Yeah, I've grown up in New Hampshire for for quite a long time. I mean, since I was a kid. So I've been living around here for quite a while, 20 something years at this point.
Oh, wow. Small world. I mean, I'm like 20, 30 minutes away from the New Hampshire border from like Rochester. I don't know if you're familiar
Yeah, I
with
know
that.
Rochester. Yeah, I'm more. I used to live in Nashua. I'm more out in the country now, still in Hillsborough County, but more towards like Keene kind of area.
Oh, I know the
Yeah.
movies. I like that. I like that. So real quick, if you don't mind, just telling the two people that listen to my show a little bit about yourself and what it is that you do.
Sure. Yeah, my name's Alex Petakov. I'm a filmmaker, cryptozoology researcher, outdoorsman, adventurer. I do documentaries about different cryptozoological mysteries, stuff like Sasquatch. I've done stuff on the Loch Ness Monster, the Lake Champlain Monster, mystery big cats, a few other topics as well. But people would probably most likely know me from my work with Small Town Monsters, which is an independent production company that does documentaries primarily about Bigfoot, cryptozoology, paranormal topics, those sorts of things. And I do a series called Bigfoot Beyond The Trail for Small Town Monsters and a few others, but that's the one primarily over on the YouTube channel. So that's been a lot of fun. So that's just a little bit about myself, I suppose.
I'm actually I'm really oblivious. I feel like sometimes because I was looking at your content on Instagram, and that's what piqued my interest in just looking into the stuff that you were doing. And I completely like you said Small Town Monsters right on your profile and everything. And I was chatting with Heather Mosier, and she had mentioned you, and I was like, I was just talking to that guy. He's a Small Town Monster too. She's like, yeah, he does focus on the trail. Well, now I have to look at his YouTube because I just talked to him to get him on the to come on here and talk to him. And I was like, now I feel like super stupid that I didn't know that part of what he does. But it was mainly your Instagram content that pulled me in. So I mean, either way, I feel like it's the stuff that you're doing is obviously resonating with people. I was actually watching a different, actually, it might have been the same episode of Bigfoot on the Trail, and you were in a helicopter, and I was like, man, I wish I could do stuff like that. I want to go in a helicopter and just go film stuff out in the wild, like, but yeah, how was it, like, all this stuff?
It's been pretty awesome. I mean, obviously, I can't complain. It's really cool to be able to cover topics that I want to cover. So I mainly do documentaries on Bigfoot cases and things that I actually personally have found interesting. Or if I know I'm going to a certain place, I'll look into some cases that maybe I've wanted to look into for a while. Obviously, as you were talking about kind of the helicopter thing, that was up in Alaska. And that was an area that, of course, I've been planning to go to for a while, and I had been invited up there by some folks. I had some stuff going on. So that was really cool to be able to go up there. And at Small Town Monsters, we did a number of documentaries up there, and I've actually done a return trip to Alaska as well. This past summer, our first trip was last year in May of 2022. And then I went up, actually drove up this past summer, and I spent a month up in Alaska. And that's what a lot of the more recent videos, even one that I'm currently editing, literally right before we recorded this, I was still editing another Alaska video. So that's been really cool to be able to cover some of those cases. As I mentioned, kind of being from New England, the New Hampshire area, there's a lot of stuff in this region that I want to focus on, but it's always cool to be able to focus on areas that previously I don't know how I would have had the ability to go and check them out. So it's kind of like I'm getting a way to check off some of my maybe bucket list items or places that I've really wanted to investigate for a while. So that's what I'm kind of in the phase of doing now, which is really awesome. But if all that were to end tomorrow, for example, I would still get to focus on the local stuff, because there's plenty of that too.
Then, I'm ready.
I'm having just a little bit of trouble hearing you again.
Of course you are.
Okay, it's a little better now.
Let's do this. I'm bringing the cameras closer. That way I don't have to yell across the room. Man, this light's a lot brighter than I thought. But yeah, there's a lot more cryptids in my area than I ever even imagined. I always just was like Bigfoot, Chupacabra, and that was pretty much it. It was when I was growing up anyway, you know. And I recently started looking into the specter moose, which was first seen in Lobster Lake here in Maine. So I've been doing a lot of research on moose and stuff. And I kind of want to start getting into what you're doing and like getting out there and investigating and stuff, which I think is pretty cool. And I've talked to a few guys that do like cryptid hunts or investigations and stuff like that are interested in coming up too. But that's probably gonna be a while before I ever am able to even have the time. You know, because you got kids, work, and then you're trying to figure out how to take a vacation, and then the vacation has to be what you're the investigation and looking into these things which would be still a good vacation.
Right, definitely. Yeah, I mean, one idea might be even just if possible, you know, you could do a quick kind of weekend scouting sort of trip, just overnight camp and try to figure out, you know, when there's free time. But yeah, that's the thing with a lot of these investigations. They're so time consuming, especially if you're going to areas that are pretty far away. Obviously, Maine is a really big state. It's the most forested state in the US by percentage of forest. So, I mean, there's plenty of habitat. I mean, I've run into a lot of moose camping throughout Maine, and I've heard stories of the specter moose as well. I don't know what's going on with that. If it's maybe white moose or that's maybe been seen, and that kind of gets turned into a bigger story. But I know there's the stories of the giant one too. So who knows? I mean, there's a lot of space out there. There's obviously a lot of weird things in the woods.
Or big in general. So just imagining a giant moose, I can't even like put that into perspective of my brain, because just I mean I've been near moose out in the wild already, and they're massive. I can't imagine anything bigger than what they are all anyway. So to come across one, I guess it's just like a giant albino, but some people are saying that I mean, obviously you've looked into it, maybe from what it sounds like a little bit. It like some sightings comes with like a ill omen or something like that, like kind of like the Mothman, like they see it before like a bad event, negative event or something like that. And then other people have like this like enlightened feeling of seeing it, and it's more like an apparition rather than a physical moose.
Yeah, it's interesting. I know there's a lot of native folklore up there in Maine as well. There's a story of the Pamula, which is kind of a native story having a connection with Katahdin. I don't know if it has the head of a moose or something like that, something along those lines, or maybe head of an eagle. I don't remember exactly the story, but yeah, moose are awesome animals. I've run into them a lot of places. I actually have them here near my home in New Hampshire. We've gotten them really close by. I've run into tons in New Hampshire and Maine. Recently in Vermont, I was out in the southern part of Vermont with a friend of mine in the so-called Bennington Triangle area, and we had a surprise run-in at night with a moose. It was a cow and a calf, and we happened to be in the middle, in between them, in like a marshy area. And we were lucky we were in a vehicle. We were driving a Jeep on some back roads in some marshy areas, and I had my thermal out, and I just happened to see this huge heat signature. And there's this big mama moose, maybe 15, 20 feet from us, like really close. And I'm like, well, we should stop. Luckily, I mean, with the thermal, I could see her ears never went back, didn't get agitated. But then we're hanging around the area. She walks off, and I'm seeing something towards the other end of the marsh. And I'm looking and I'm saying, what is this? Is it a deer? It was smaller. And then I noticed finally I could see it come up over the bushes, and it was a calf. And I'm like telling my buddy, I'm like, dude, we're in between mama and baby right now. This is in North America. This is probably the worst place you could be in between, moose statistically are one of the most dangerous animals. But yeah, I've seen them in Colorado, out in Utah, seen moose in Canada, British Columbia, into the Yukon, and a ton in Alaska. I mean, they're all over the place in Alaska. You see them right in town as well. Biggest moose I ever saw was a bull moose on the side of the road in northern British Columbia as we were driving up to Alaska. We had seen two, what looked like a female and a younger one, cross the road. And then a little ways after that, there was just, well, I actually couldn't believe it was a moose at first. I'm looking at it saying, what is that? It's like, that is a bull moose. Like that, it was a monster. I mean, this thing had to have been at least 1,200 plus pounds, just huge. And the moose up in northern Canada and into Alaska are the largest of the moose subspecies. So you have in North America, there's 3 or 4 different subspecies. You got the Rocky Mountain one, the eastern moose, which would be the one that we have in our neck of the woods here. But the Alaska/Yukon moose is the largest in the world of any moose subspecies. There's also a subspecies, I believe, in Russia, and then goes into like Scandinavia and those areas. But the Alaskan one, they're massive. This thing was huge. And I've seen a giant bull moose run in front of my car in New Hampshire and disappear into the woods. But this thing was, I mean, it was just looked like solid creature. I mean, it was hitting it, you might as well hit a tree. You're hitting something that weighs that much, and absolutely crazy. But they're beautiful animals, really cool to see them. I actually use them as a little bit of a test for Sasquatch. So if a habitat can support a lot of moose, that kind of tells me that there's a biological viability for potentially something like a Sasquatch to exist. So if a habitat, let's say Maine, can support upwards of 50,000 moose, could it support 10 Sasquatch? I mean, you got 30,000 black bear in Maine, up to between 50 to 70,000 moose. So that's the most amount of moose anywhere in the U.S. outside of Alaska. So that habitat has to support these gigantic animals, and moose eat a lot more than bear or other animals that you're going to have around here. So yeah, to be able to support those creatures, I'd say there's a fair chance that if potentially something like a Sasquatch was in the habitat, it might be able to survive in that kind of environment.
I think that's probably something to that as well. So when you go out on these investigations out in the woods, do you ever go armed? I don't think I've ever seen you in any of your videos with anything.
Yeah, so I usually am armed, actually.
Okay.
So some of the earlier ones, yeah, you could probably see I would open carry usually, especially if we're in an area where obviously it's legal. You got to pay attention to the different states and everything you're in. But luckily, most of the times when we're in very rural parts of the country, there's pretty lenient open carry laws and that kind of thing. If not, you'll conceal carry. But as of the last, this past year, I've been implementing this thing called a Hill People chest rig, which is a pouch that you put on your chest, and it has some other stuff in it, but actually allows you, it acts like a chest rig that you would have for a firearm to kind of sit on there. I mean, actually I have the chest rig over here. I don't know if you're going to use the video here or not. I could try to demonstrate it if you want, but
yeah, I put the video up on YouTube. So
I'm trying to free your mind, but I can only show you the door. You're the one that has to walk through it. And by walking through it, my friends, head on over to www.deeperdown.store. There you will find some sick-ass threads, AI-inspired art on t-shirts, hoodies, flip-flops and cups, and motherfucking tote bags. I promise you, my friends, if you follow the rabbit, you will not be disappointed. You can also find _ down the dot rabbit hole _ on Instagram. He has thousands of followers, and he shows you deep down the rabbit hole on conspiracies, hauntings, and cryptids. I highly recommend you subscribe for $2.99 a month. Also, if you check out his store, upon checkout, enter code KevinsWeird18. There, my friends, you will get 18% off of your purchase. So please, I highly recommend and suggest to you to go check out his store. David is a good friend and he deserves the utmost respect, and I wish him nothing but success. But this is your last chance. After this, there is no turning back. You take the blue pill, the story ends. You wake up in your bed and believe whatever you want to believe. You take the red pill, you stay in Wonderland. And I show you how deep the rabbit hole goes.
Okay. I have the, see if I can take my headphones on. Okay. Does my sound okay?
Sound pretty good.
Make sure, because I had to disconnect my headphones. I'm not gonna be able to use this thing with the headphones on. It's gonna probably be confusing. But anyway, so yeah, I can kind of show you what it looks like. This is what I use when I'm in the woods. It's a Hill People Gear chest rig. So what it acts like is I actually happen to have one of my carry revolvers here completely empty. We're clear. This is just a 357 Magnum. So what this allows you to do is keep it right in here. So this is usually what I'll have on me, and it's tucked away. It's nice and safe. And what I usually do is I keep it slightly open like this. So the idea is if you needed to get quick access, you'd be able to have that and just kind of have it right there in access. And what's really cool is it's not just a chest rig. I mean, a lot of people are now wearing just chest rigs, so it's easy access. It's a little bit easier than having it on your hip, but I also have a lot of other features with this. So it's got a whole other pocket where I can store other materials. So I happen to have a first aid kit right in here, got access to that. I've got a pretty good flashlight that I can hang right here. I've also got stuff like a Garmin GPS, my InReach, something I obviously for navigating and communicating. I've got a Bigfoot Bushcrafter fire starting kit. It's got a ferro rod and some little fire starters. I've got a Sawyer Squeeze mini filter, water filter. So when you're out and you need a water source, and I also have a collapsible pouch that allows you can put that onto the filter, rather the water filter goes onto this pouch. So you can fill this with water and you can drink straight from the pouch when it's attached. So I've got just a lot of stuff in here that I kind of keep. It's really easy to have this and very convenient. There's also a front pocket, and in this front pocket I usually keep, let's see in here, I've got some GoPro batteries. I should probably charge these things, but so you can see I use it for extra battery storage. I also usually try to keep like my keys in my wallet. So for example, if I'm hiking around, I have those in there. It's easy. And if I'm just doing a quick little day hike, this is super easy to carry. I've also got a knife that goes underneath. This is just a Mora knife, just a kind of cheap bushcrafting knife, but I like the system it's on. Super convenient, wear it right on the outside. Very comfortable to wear. I can also strap a GoPro right here so I can have an extra camera and have my hands free. And the idea was kind of born out of wanting to, one, have more essential gear with me, while, open carrying on the hip, it can get snagged on things, get caught on things. So unless I'm just sitting around at camp, then it's fine to have it like in a holster or something like that. But for me personally, I found this works. People recommended it. It's really convenient, and I have everything here. And also the idea is, let's say I'm backpacking, I've got my bigger backpack on, or even a day pack, and God forbid something horrible happens and we have to ditch our packs, or I have to ditch my main backpack. I can get rid of that and know I have all the essentials I need to keep myself safe. I have lights. I have way to start a fire. I've got a way to filter water, first aid kit, all right here. So it doubles as something you could wear if you're just stepping out for a quick day hike, if you're not bringing a pack, or as something you can kind of run away with. But it is really cool, and the pouch back here allows you to have a lot of different stuff. So I mean, it doesn't have to be necessarily a revolver. This is just, I happen to be using it for a video, so I was filming that. But you could take something like, this is a just a 9mm pistol. You could have something like that in there. Same exact idea. It's essentially anything that'll fit in here, you can keep it in here, and it opens the same way. You can practice with it, and you just kind of open it, and you're able to grab it and get access to whatever you need. So you could do, like I said, revolvers, pistols. I even put bear spray in here before when I was in Canada, where I obviously couldn't have a pistol with me. I just put my bear spray right in here. So there's a lot of different stuff you can do with it. If you were to have like a striker fire pistol like this that doesn't have a manual safety, I don't usually carry this in the woods with me, but they do create like a little lock, so you can lock that trigger up, attach it to here, so when you pull it out, that trigger guard stays in there. But this is just, it's been so convenient. I can't say how much I like these things. In the backside, it's got like a mesh kind of thing, super convenient and easy to use. I mean, it's so comfortable, I might even just wear it for the rest of this interview, just keep it on. But no, I'll take it off here just to kind of demonstrate how easy it is to take off. There we go. It's now off and super convenient. So like I said, this is the back side of it. It's just a little mesh, and it clips right into here, and you can load it with whatever, customize it however you like. That's how I happen to rock mine. And I've been using it now for a better part of 8-9 months. I think I started first deploying in February. So yeah, it really works well. So that's to answer your question, are we armed? Usually yes. I prefer not to be unarmed in the woods, and at least have something like bear spray, because you never know. I mean, I don't think animals are necessarily the biggest threat out there. You want to be smart about it, but unfortunately we've had some weird run-ins with strange people too. So that's not something I want to do. Yeah, so even just the act of deterrence, in some instances, a firearm, I've had a couple situations where I think just having it on me, would repel any would-be wrongdoers or anything like that. So yeah, but I think, like I said, that piece of gear for me is great. The Hill People Gear chest rig, I've used it in the swamps of Louisiana, locally here in New England, British Columbia, up in Alaska. It's been soaked in coastal rainforest weather in Alaska on the coast. It's been covered in dirt on dusty roads, and I'll be taking it to all the other destinations I plan on going in the near future. So yeah, that is usually, like I said, I prefer just having something like a pistol or some sort of handgun on me in the woods. There will be some cases like up in Alaska where we do carry, actually one of our times in Maine too, Maine, Alaska, places where there's moose. I do like to have something like a 12 gauge just on standby, because you never know. I mean, that's just something I think it's a good thing to have, maybe like a camp weapon or something like that.
Or I
Headphones on.
completely agree with you. Yeah, that was one of the reasons why I had asked was because the last video that I watched was you came across somebody in the woods. It was a car, and you're like, well, we all know, that animals aren't the only threat, even in the
Right.
woods. Sometimes people come out to desolate areas to do negative activity. So
Yes, yeah, we've run into quite a few of those strange situations. I don't know which video you're referring to. Was it just a like it was at it was at night, or what was what do you remember what happened?
it was a conversation, and weren't very close to it, but you could see the headlights, and you just turned around and went back.
Oh, okay. I'm trying to recall. It wasn't in Florida, was it?
I think it was actually. I think it was
Okay.
Florida.
Yeah, we did have a couple occasions out there where you just run into some people, but we had a really weird incident happen when we first started doing the Bigfoot Beyond the Trail series, which was up in Oregon, where we ran into what we believe was some kind of Satanist or some kind of ritual going on. It was really weird. Well, the long story short is that we were out there with some of Cliff Barrickman's guys from the North American Bigfoot Center Museum outside of Portland, Oregon, and we're in the Mount Hood National Forest. We're just driving around, and we are checking out this book called the Oregon Sasquatch Highway. I believe that's the title of the book. It's by Joe Bielart. Fantastic book. Been a few years since I read it. This was back in 2021. It was July of 2021. We're out there in Oregon. Myself, a bunch of guys, and some of these guys from the North American Bigfoot Center. And we go to this sighting location that's in Joe Bielart's book with a really cool sighting encounter. A guy was fishing on the river with his kids, and this Sasquatch comes out of the woods and is getting really aggressive with them. They started getting freaked out, and apparently the guy even had to use his fishing rod and held it straight out, and the Sasquatch used its hand and pushed against the fishing rod. It's like a crazy encounter, right? So
Wow.
So we're like, yeah, this is a cool place. Let's go check it out. There's a campground, and not an official campground. This is a national forest campground. You just pulled in on a road, and there's a little primitive fire pit. It's it's not an organized campground or anything. So we're like, yeah, let's go here. And there's a road that kind of loops around, and you hike down into the campsite. So the road is sort of above it. We noticed there was another truck there when we got there, and we could hear people down by the river making noise. So we thought, oh, it must be somebody fishing. We showed up in the daytime, and as it started getting darker, there was a few people down in camp. We had set up our tents, and I was up by the cars with a couple of the other guys, and we were just chatting because two of the guys weren't staying with us, so they were getting ready to head out. All of a sudden, out of the woods, this dude just pops out from the tree line. He almost looked very surprised to see us, and then he just starts walking up and to walk past us. And he was lanky, was wearing this weird black outfit with this golden vest thing on. He just looked really off. And I saw him first, and I'm like, what is this guy doing? And then the rest of us noticed, and we're kind of shocked. And I had my 357 on my hip at the time, and I kind of made sure it was sort of visible. Just to, again, the deterrence, you never know, right? I mean, where it's legal to open carry, you might as well, especially in a wilderness area. But this guy, he just walked past us, and one of the guys in our group just sort of blurted out, going for an evening stroll. And he just kind of nodded and kept going. He walks by, and we're all looking at each other so confused. I mean, this is not what you expect to see in the woods, right? Totally out of place. We're all trying to figure out what just happened. And the guy who said something to him is like, there's nothing over there. I mean, where is he going? It's not like this is a behind a neighborhood where you can take a little stroll, like people might walk through, ride their bikes or whatever, middle of nowhere. So that was weird. And it started getting dark after that point too. And we noticed still up on the road that you could see down towards the river, there was these little fires, and what looked like tiki torches in a circle. And we started zooming in on it, and we're saying, this is a little weird. I don't know what these people are doing. So then we look into the truck that was parked there, and there was animal bones that were painted gold hanging from the rear view mirror. and a pentagram. So we were a little bit weirded out. That was just a little strange. And then as we're packing our camp up, because we said, you know what, we're going to get out of here. We just don't want to do with this, right? This is weird. Then we figured out what that guy was doing. A couple of us were sneaking around the bushes, and we found there's some little trails that kind of go around these campsites that you can't really see them very easily. One of those trails comes right out where that guy walked out of the woods. And if you walk up on the road, and as you're walking around that campsite we were in, you can look down into the camp. But when you're inside the camp and looking up, you can't see who's on the road. So what we think is that he was scoping us out. He was just checking out our campsite, maybe not for a nefarious reason, but it was a little weird. It's like your circle. I mean, it'd be weird if you're camping and somebody's circling you, right? Like that is not a normal kind of thing. So, and we saw, the people making noises, and they had these tiki torches lined up in a circle. And we said, you know what, let's just go. That was, I don't know if it was necessarily scary more than it was just weird. Some of us were a little freaked out, but there was like 7 of us there. So it's not like we were, 1 or 2 people where, I would definitely be a little more concerned, but it was weird. So running into weird people is definitely pretty common. I mean, even I had another instance in Florida this past year with just one of my buddies, and we're filming some skunk ape stuff, and we're also looking for Florida panthers, which are down there in the Everglades area. So we're in South Florida, like deep in the Everglades, and we're in this area called the Picayune Strand Forest, and it's part of the Western Everglades. I mean, it's like I think it's 40 to 70,000 acres of just protected land, but it connects to all the other protected land that's part of the Big Cypress National Preserve, the Everglades, the Florida Panther Refuge, the Fakahatchee Strand State Forest. So that's like almost 3 million acres all combined. So it's bigger than the size of Rhode Island, to put in perspective, of protected land. Once you get out of Miami, you're basically in the middle of nowhere. So we're out there, and we were actually casting some footprints of alligators. There were these huge alligator tracks we were finding. We thought it was really cool. And there's just a lot of people go off-roading on their Jeeps in those back roads. So we were out there in a Jeep, and it's not easy to get to. And all of a sudden, from this flooded section that we couldn't even get through with the Jeep, we see these vehicles, this convoy moving through with, people that looked rather suspicious. To me, they looked like they were from Central or South America, just a large group of people, and they looked like, maybe workers or something like that. But they were in Humvees, and they were in these vehicles that are called swamp buggies that they use down in South Florida, which are like these trucks with an elevated platform on them where you can sit on them. So you're obviously, because sometimes they got to get through some of these swampy, marshy areas. It's a lot easier to go with like a speed or an airboat or a swamp buggy, so you don't get stuck. It was just such a surreal scene. You're in the middle of nowhere in this swamp that has skunk ape reports, Florida panther sightings. There's 10-foot alligators a couple hundred feet away from us. I mean, it's like a jungle almost. And then all of a sudden there's this convoy, and there were 5 or 6 of these vehicles that came by, like Humvees. I'm talking like military looking Humvees with like a woodland camo paint, and then these swamp buggies, and these guys all on there with backpacks, some of them wearing bandanas, and some of them were waving at us. It was just me and my one buddy, and we're just kind of standing there looking at each other like, what are we witnessing? We don't know what's going on, because smuggling operation, I mean, I don't know. I don't want to be caught in some kind of thing like that. We happen to be only a few miles from the Gulf of Mexico, the coastline right there, because we were kind of on the western side of Florida. So outside of Naples is where that is. So, I mean, if you go in the direction where they were coming from and just go south, you'll hit the Gulf of Mexico. So I don't know if there's some weird stuff going on over there, but that was just also more bizarre than frightening. Obviously, we were severely outnumbered, but there wasn't any threats or anything. It just was not something you expect. And then a helicopter went flying over shortly after that. So we were just completely confused, right? I mean, what it's like, it's not what you expect at all. So that was totally weird. But that's more recent strange experience, I guess. So it's one of those things, and I joked about this, but then I kind of included it when we did a documentary on the Bridgewater Triangle. That area has down in Massachusetts, it's got a history of horrific murders and mob activity and all kinds of cult stuff. I say, on my travels looking for Bigfoot, looking for monsters, I've realized that who the real monsters are is the human beings. We're the ones committing all these horrific acts, and Sasquatch seems to be just a nice forest creature for the most part. I'm not saying it's not capable of like any other animal, but animals are pretty predictable. It's the humans that are unpredictable. So yeah, those are just a few weird stories out there in the bush, stuff that you can't expect to see that sort of stuff. It just sort of happens.
I was gonna. My son wants to hike the Appalachian Trail, right? And I was looking into it and stuff. In the 100-mile wilderness in Maine, to Katahdin, there's like stories of wild men. And I was just like, wild men. And the more I thought about it, I'm like, these are just like people that live in the woods. And they just, there are stories of them just circling camp tents and stuff, or in the middle of the night, people will wake up and there's like just footprints right around there in a circle of their tent and stuff like that. And I was like,
That's creepy.
So,
Yeah. Maybe there are wild people living in some of these areas. I've heard of stories of feral people living in parts of Appalachia and up here. And, there was that famous case of that guy in Maine who was like undetected for almost 30 years out there.
yeah, I know what you're talking about.
I don't remember his name, but he was living in this like little shanty, Robinson Crusoe kind of village that he made for himself, and he was stealing food from some of the local campgrounds and breaking into people's houses, but he went undetected for a long time. So there's just you hear stories like that are weird. Obviously there's a lot of weird disappearances too, but yeah, I've heard that 100-mile wilderness is pretty wild. I actually know of a guy who reported a encounter with what he believes was some kind of Sasquatch. I don't think he saw it, but he was camping doing the AT, and he was somewhere in Maine. I don't know if it was exactly on the 100-mile wilderness. It might have been, but it was, most of Maine on the Appalachian Trail is extremely remote. So regardless of location, I do believe it was closer towards the end of his hike, though. He was out there and he was in his tent, and he had all kinds of weird branches crashing, and he was hearing strange noises and kind of the typically Sasquatch reported stuff, the whoops and the wood knocks, and he was just kind of in his tent trying to sleep, and didn't really work very well trying to sleep through some of that stuff. But yeah, there's definitely a history of reports in Maine, but man, there could be some weird people holdout living out there. You've got one of those Navy search and rescue like SEAL facilities up there near the Appalachian Trail. So maybe people running into some of those guys that are doing their training. They're not supposed to run into people. So who knows what's going
on. Now, have you ever like personally seen a Bigfoot or anything?
I've not personally had a sighting. I've had some weird experiences that I can't say are Sasquatch 100%, but they fit in a category I would consider purported behavior. So you've got stuff that Sasquatches are alleged to do, and that's some of the stuff I've experienced that, I can't confirm that they're Sasquatch. They might not be, right? But they're in that category of encounters that are a little bit weird. So I've heard stuff like the whoops and stuff in Bluff Creek. We had that happen in Northern California near the location of the Patterson-Gimlin film site. I've had like rocks and stuff thrown at me in both Vermont and Alaska. We've had some stuff like that happen here in wood knocks. Now there's other explanations for wood knocks and those sorts of things, but once you start hearing deliberate ones and mixed in with other vocalizations, it's a little bit strange. Just stuff like that that's sort of unusual, that happens at times where there's no wind, there's no disruptions, nothing else going on. So you can't say with 100% certainty, of course, but it's a little bit unusual. So I kind of put them in that, like I said, that category of purported potential encounters. But I've not had a visual myself. I have interviewed at this point probably hundreds of people who have claimed to have had some sorts of encounters, and many of them which were visual, Class A kind of encounters as well, and a number of them that I would consider to be pretty credible. So yeah, very interesting but unfortunately, I've not seen one myself. But maybe that'll change. I don't know.
That's the the goal with the investigating, searching, and stuff like that, right? But would you say you're in what camp would you say you're in? The Bigfoot is of Earth or an extraterrestrial?
Yeah, that's the big debate, right?
Yeah,
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I personally lean more towards the flesh and blood camp, the idea that this is some sort of a probably a relic hominid of some kind, maybe something related to humans. A lot of people have suggested Gigantopithecus. I think these things are probably decently rare, so it's not easy to find them. I mean, imagine a few thousand of these things spread across North America. That's absolutely almost nothing. There are weirder aspects to some of the stories, but in my experience, the orbs and other stuff associated with it is a minority of the reports. So we're talking like less than 5% or so of reports, at least that I've interviewed people, but I don't discount them. I mean, that's one of those things that I don't want to say, hey, that just because it doesn't fit the way I look at it doesn't mean I'm not going to include it or talk about it. I mean, in my first ever Bigfoot Beyond the Trail episode, I had stories with the guy with the encounters in New Hampshire, and he had seen some kind of a orb and then got a rock thrown at the screen in front of his face, and that's when he got a little bit freaked out and contacted the BFRO after that. So I don't know. I mean, what I find interesting is the consistency of reports across North America, especially older reports going pre-internet, pre-YouTube, because now anyone can watch a Bigfoot documentary very easily. So if they wanted to fake an encounter, they could go watch a few documentaries online and learn how to mimic a Sasquatch report, right? Whereas in the 1940s in remote British Columbia, you'd be lucky to even get a book about primate behavior back then. So some of those old reports have a lot of really interesting consistencies with some modern reports. People who aren't as maybe tech savvy or who really don't want to share their sightings. That's something I've run into in New Hampshire, where people just don't. It's like pulling teeth. In New England, I mean, all these old loggers and people that live in the woods, sometimes they don't even come forward with their Bigfoot stories until years after they've retired, because they don't want to be seen as the Bigfoot guy on the crew, or you're kooky and crazy. Quite a few of the witnesses I've interviewed in New Hampshire come to mind have had that sort of reluctance, and I've had people reach out to me anonymously and told me their stories, and I've talked to them over the phone, and they don't know what they saw. They think maybe, especially because Bigfoot wasn't culturally known in the Northeast, they thought I saw a hairy monster or some kind of a weird creature, and they didn't even connect it with Bigfoot until years later. I know people who have had an encounter that they didn't know how to categorize it, and then they watched a show like Monster Quest and somebody talks about a similar encounter and they say, was that a Bigfoot I encountered? I always considered it like a hairy ape man, right? Because there's no cultural awareness. They say Bigfoot's only in the Pacific Northwest or down south. So that's really interesting. And then the other interesting factor, aside from some of the corresponding details between the encounters, is these prevalence of behaviors that have been reported in North America for a long time that we now know are known ape behaviors in like gorillas and chimps and orangutans. Now, I'm not saying Bigfoot is analogous to a gorilla or a chimp. There's clearly big differences. Just like a human being, we're not the same as a chimp, even though we are so genetically close to them. It's very, very similar. So Sasquatch could be something that's very closely related to us, but it's going to be very different. Again, just look at chimps and humans. We are bipedal. We don't climb with our feet. Chimps and gorillas have divergent toes. They have a thumb on their foot that allows them to grab stuff. A little chimp can beat up multiple adult males with the amount of strength that they have. So very different creatures. So but what's interesting is you have these behaviors that have been reported in North America for a long time that have since been discovered to be Sasquatch or actual ape behaviors. So, for example, one of them is the idea of smell. A lot of encounters with Sasquatch describe smell, and it's not all the reports. I mean, it's not even, in my opinion, not even 50% of reports describe some sort of a strange smell. And I'm not just talking skunk ape down south, where there's maybe if you live in a swamp, you might smell, right? But across the board in Northern California, in West Virginia and Washington, New Hampshire, there are a handful of reports that describe people, and it's always very consistent descriptions. It's smells like rotting meat, sometimes sulfur, sometimes rotting egg smell. Wet dog is one that comes up a lot. And then one that I've heard personally at least 3 or 4 times, smelled like the monkey house at the zoo, for people that have spent time in like the primate house at the zoo. And that, like I said, these are descriptions I've heard multiple times from people in different parts of North America. But then you'll talk to another person who had an eyewitness or who had a Class A encounter. They don't say it smelled like anything. There was no smell at all. So how do you explain that, right? Is it the idea that this creature just lives in the woods so it smells bad? I don't think so. We now know that gorillas can actually control their scent glands to release an odor if they're agitated or angry. So that,
you didn't know that.
That monkey house smell could be, gorillas just releasing their musk. It's like if you could control your body odor. If your neighbor annoyed you, you could just smell really bad and then go, give them a hug or something. And like that's like what apparently gorillas can do that. So that's a really interesting parallel to Sasquatch. Another one is the idea of wood knocks or rock knocks as some kind of communication. So people, this is stuff I've heard, people describe hearing what sounds like knocks in the woods, or rocks, or even rocks being thrown as kind of an intimidation factor. Well, there's been studies with chimps in Africa that shows that they actually will throw rocks at trees as a communication method. And we'll just do it randomly too, but they will communicate that way by throwing rocks at trees. And there's footage of them doing it as well once they've been kind of studied for quite a while. So that's really interesting. And then a recent one I learned about, it's very intriguing. So for a long time, people in the Sasquatch community and people who are researchers and witnesses have talked about hearing a vocalization of one of these things and feeling it vibrate in their chest, almost feeling paralyzed with fear, just really kind of actually physically feeling like a vibration in their chest. I know a person from New Hampshire, a friend of mine, who had an encounter up in the White Mountains where something brushed its hand on his tent and then let out this vocalization that he said vibrated through his chest. I know of a guy in Massachusetts, former park ranger, who saw 2 Sasquatches out in western Massachusetts in Savoy State Forest. He said one of these things roared at him and he kind of felt the roar. And that's Oregon. I've heard encounters, all sorts of really weird encounters. Now, some people over the years have speculated that maybe these vocalizations have infrasound, which is a frequency that's used by a lot of animals, and we're just starting to learn about it, that animals can actually use to communicate. So lions and tigers can use it. Elephants use infrasound to communicate underground for miles. I mean, it's mind-blowing once you start learning about it. And there's been experiments. So it's like frequencies that we can't hear. So for example, when there's a big hurricane or something, a big natural disaster, people often report seeing wildlife fleeing. Cats and dogs go missing because they run away from home. Well, animals can actually hear the infrasound of kind of the weather patterns and things that are shifting in the air. Those are frequencies that we can't hear because we as primates are not known to have very good hearing, but we are susceptible to it. So we do hear it, but not in a way that we can actually understand, right? So you use an infrasound frequency on maybe a dog or something, they can actually understand it and will act upon it. Whereas a human can be affected by infrasound, but you will have no idea it's going on. There's been some university studies, I believe, that did infrasound at a concert, and it can create feelings of dread, even like slight nausea in people, really anxious feelings. So it can create these like tense kind of feelings in people, which is really, really bizarre. So relating it back to some of the Sasquatch stuff, I mean, some have argued that, well, if you get roared at by something that supposedly is 800 pounds and is 8 feet tall, right? It's going to have a much bigger diaphragm, vocal capacity than a human, right? I mean, it's like you take a human lungs and vocal cords and make it twice as large. There's probably more power there. Sure, yeah, that would definitely explain part of it, but not this weird feeling. People are saying they feel this vibration, audibly hearing vocalizations. But recently, a couple of scientists, primatologists in Africa, were studying gorillas for a number of years. And in a paper I was reading, they casually mentioned that they believe that male gorillas produce infrasonic vocalizations that affects female gorillas. So their vocalizations will have some kind of effect on the females. I would imagine it's in a way that tries to influence them, I'm a stronger, more alpha male than this guy. But that's mind-blowing because primates are one of the animals that's not really known to have infrasonic abilities. So if this is true, that is pretty mind-blowing, because I'm not saying it directly relates to Sasquatch, but I think it's worth arguing that, hey, this is something we should look into, because you have, again, multiple instances of behaviors that have been talked about in North America that have now been shown to be potential ape behaviors in other continents that have nothing to do with North America. So that is a very intriguing set of coincidences for me when it comes to this topic.
Interesting. I've talked to a few people about like infrasound, and I never knew like that other animals actually could do it. And I've been told that I was like crazy and stuff. And you hear like conspiracies too about the government doing it to certain like witnesses or like people that they are trying to get to for whatever reason. Everybody's just like, there's no such thing, there's no way.
I've heard
blah,
about it.
blah,
They talked
blah.
about the Cuban thing, something with Cuba. Some
Yeah,
sort of, I mean, sound weapons exist. Like, this is not even
for sure.
controversial. There are weapons used for crowd control they use sound, and they basically, it's like, it's horrific. It'll absolutely kill, well, not kill you, but it kills your hearing for a temporary moment. It can create some sort of a sense of, you're kind of it's like if a flashbang went off right next to your ear. I mean, in the same room, right? It's a sound weapon in a sense, but these sound weapons are some kind of like directed sound. So that sort of stuff exists. And as we know, as it goes with militaries, like it's been with some of the stealth fighters and other weapons that the military has, we often don't find out about the kind of stuff they have until 10, 15 years later. During the Cold War, that was certainly true. I don't, now we're already talking about space and all space weapons and all this other stuff now. So sound weapons are definitely a thing. Again, it's not even controversial. There are examples of it in some instances. So it's just so interesting because, again, going back to my point earlier, you can't hear this stuff, right? These are frequencies that you can't hear, but you can be affected by them. So this is I remember when I was, in high school, when it was kind of, there were like those iPod Nanos and little iPhones were coming out. It was the first iterations. All these apps were suddenly coming around. There were these frequency apps you could get where you would play different frequencies. So we would do experiments in class where we'd play the frequency off the phone, see how many of us, we're all like teenagers, like, oh yeah, we can all hear that. And our professor's like, well, I can't hear that, because that person, being much older than us, has lost access to those frequencies that they previously would have. And so, when you have, like, let's say you shoot a gun without ear protection, you'll hear that ringing. That's tinnitus. That's actually frequencies. That's the last time you'll hear that frequency. It's frequencies being destroyed in your hearing. So it's really, sound is crazy. I mean, sound is really interesting. I'm not a sound expert. Please don't take any of what I say here as fact check me, but this is just stuff that I've kind of compounded over some kind of amateur research that I've done on these topics, because you think about sound a lot with Sasquatch, because there are a lot of these weird sounds and things reported. And like I said, one of my good friends, with his encounter, he said this thing roared and I could feel it vibrating through my chest. It's like if you're in a concert standing next to a speaker and you get that weird sensation when you feel the music, it's like pulsating through you, because it's vibrating your body. So how is it that it's these alleged Sasquatch vocalizations are doing that as well? I don't know, but that's the kind of stuff that we want to start looking at a little more, I'd say.
Really think that there's some meat to that bone for Sasquatch to have that ability, for sure. I personally have never seen or had an encounter that I could say was a Sasquatch.
Right.
I have had an instance in Shapley, Maine, which is heavily wooded. There was red eyes in the woods, and it was accompanied with a pack of coyotes, but it wasn't like, from what I could tell, it was probably a little bit more than 6 foot tall. And I didn't know at the time. I was just like, there's something freaky out there. And
Right.
I was overcome with this sense of dread, right?
That's
like most
interesting.
people do. Yeah.
Well, that's interesting. Go ahead.
I'd been, and so that was in 2016. 2020, I started listening to podcasts, mainly Joe Rogan and stuff like that. And then I got into conspiracies, and then conspiracies led me to paranormal stuff, which paranormal stuff tends to get onto the cryptid topics and stuff like that.
Right.
And I started listening to more, I started hearing stories about the dog man, and I was just like, well, a lot of these stories sound like what what I had experienced back in that house. So I'm attributing that to be that.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, yeah, it's one of those things that once you start going down the rabbit hole, right, it's easy to jump from topic to topic. But going back to that feeling of dread, I mean, I've heard that with people describing Sasquatch encounters as well. And then one of the other most common things I hear is the feeling of being watched, right? And that sometimes can be mixed with a feeling of dread. It just depends on the way the person is interpreting, I think. But the feeling of being watched, I mean, that's like one of the most cliched things in the Sasquatch topic. So many people, I cannot tell you the amount of times I've heard, I felt like I was being watched, and then they had something happen. And I've had this type of feeling only a couple of times out there in the woods where I've really had a feeling like I was being watched. And the freakiest one I had was back in 2020. I was taking a friend of mine to a local research area of mine where there's a history of activity. It was actually featured in the first ever Beyond the Trail, and a recent one I did called Return to the Granite State Bigfoot Case, which is a follow-up to that. I was hiking in that area with a buddy of mine. We weren't filming or anything. We just went for a night hike. And we went to this one part of this area that goes off of a trail where there's been some weird stuff. And we decided to turn back from there. And I remember then, like, it was such a tangible feeling, just this hair on the back of your neck standing up. Like, oh, I get goosebumps thinking about that feeling. Like I literally have them right now. And I'm thinking to myself in my head, wow, I think we're being watched. And that same moment, I thought that in my head, my friend just blurts out, dude, I think we're being watched. And I turned to him and I said, what? I started cursing him. What the F did you just say? How did you know I was thinking that? He's like, I don't know. I just have this really weird feeling that we're being watched. And I thought I was just thinking that to myself. And I've never had something like that happen before. And he wasn't into Bigfoot at all. So we were like, okay, well, this is weird. Let's start heading back, I guess, to the vehicles. And, we're like a mile or so into the woods at this point, and we're just hiking this little trail. It pitch black. Nobody else is out there. I mean, we're the only people on like a Thursday night during first few months of COVID that are out there past dark. Everyone else is probably scared at home or something. But obviously getting out in the woods is nice. And after that, a few minutes later, we start hearing what sounds like wood knocks and trees being broken in this swamp across from me. And I started recording audio. I didn't have a thermal at the time. If I did, I feel like maybe I could have looked over in that direction. But then I went hiking into that area a few days later, and I mean, there's just tree damage everywhere. I couldn't find anything specific or any evidence. I was looking for footprints or anything, but it was really weird how it happened. Like, I feel like we're being watched, and that happens. And then we start hearing these noises a few minutes later. And afterwards, he's like, okay, well, that was really weird. What just happened? Because I didn't tell him this is an area I've been coming to doing kind of amateur research. I didn't want to put anything in his mind. I just said, hey, let's go on a night hike. He was a buddy of mine I used to hike with. So we just went for a night hike for fun. And then afterwards, I'm like, well, this is the history of this area. He's like, well, that was really weird what we experienced tonight. I don't know what to make of it. And I'm like, take it or leave it. I mean, I don't, we probably both have more questions than answers right now. So that was a really weird one, but it was such a tangible feeling. I've only ever gotten that feeling there 2 other times in that particular same general location. Once while camping, and we had heard stuff moving around our camp in that area. We were just camping in the middle of this little kind of clearing area. And then we had wood knocks recorded that night. And another time I was out there going shooting, actually. And I just was really, really creeped out in a place that I've been to like a million times, that I hike alone all the time. But this one day I was just really creeped out and didn't want to go in. And I've run into moose in that area. I've run into bear, all kinds of stuff. People out there. I mean, it's near a state forest. I've run into people, and I've never really had that feeling other than those few occasions in that particular area. But that instance was really weird. It was like, how did he know what I was thinking? I really cannot explain that. other than we were both feeling the same thing. He happened to say it, I was happening to think about it. So it's weird.
Well, friends, I need you to take a second. Head on over to www.fineartmedium.com. Emily is a medium, a working medium at that. She does readings, and she's artsy. She does graphic design. So, if you're in the market for a logo, because maybe you're starting a business, maybe you're even starting a podcast, and your logo needs met, Emily is who you want to reach out to. I promise you won't be disappointed in her artwork. I also know that if you need a reading, past life regression, this medium, not only is she compassionate, she's extremely intelligent. She will get your needs met. You can go onto her website, you can see all of her reviews. I promise you, my friends, you won't be disappointed in this. So give her your time if you're in the need for it. She made a couple of my t-shirt designs, and we're working on a comic book. So if you have graphic design needs, check her out. As always, my friends, stay weird. Do you need healing crystals? Do you need to get your chakras aligned and heal your mind, body, and soul? You need to check yourself and become one with the universe once again. Then I suggest you head on over to www.etsy.com/shop/heal with Christina. That's where you'll find all sorts of custom designed crystals for your healing and visual pleasure. I promise you won't be disappointed with the plethora of things you can choose from. Necklaces, healing crystals, all sorts of wire type things and such. Christina is a good friend of mine, and she enjoys helping people, so please help her out by checking out her shop. And at checkout, please use code WEIRD125 for a 25% off discount. That is www.etsy.com/shop/healwithchristina. And remember, friends, use my coupon code WEIRD125. That is a capital W on that, so you can get your 25% off discount. I promise you, you won't be disappointed in checking this out. Well, my friends, when you do, tell Christina I said hi. Stay weird, my friends.
Were they like all those incidences? Were they like same like season?
No, so they were different seasons. The instance I talked about with my friend, that was like April of 2020. So it was right after it started getting kind of warm and the spring peepers and the bugs were starting to come out. The second instance was that 2020 also, but the summer, probably about July, it was more towards the evening. So this first instance it was like after 9 p.m. So like it was almost maybe 10, 11 when this happened. The second time I just was going to this area, there's like a power line cut and people shoot, like I'm sure in Maine they do too. In New Hampshire and Maine, you don't have a lot of wide open spaces. So people often create local informal shooting pits and just go and target practice. I just happened to show up there and it was like towards the evening. It was in the summertime. I remember it wasn't dark, but it was getting, it would be dark in a couple of hours. That's when it happened. And the first time was actually in 2019 when the first time I ever camped out in this general location. And all three of where these things happen are probably within a couple miles of each other. So we were camping that instance in 2019. And this was before this area was even really on my radar. And after that, it was in 2020, I started researching there. But this instance of 2019, we're camping, buddy of mine and I, and we hear stuff like moving in the bushes around us. And we're thinking like, it's just some critters, like it's normal, right? You'd hear movement in one area, we kind of focus in on it, and then you'd hear it from another direction. And then from behind us, and we were both into Bigfoot. So we're like, no, I don't want to, we don't want to think anything weird. And that night I happened to just set up an audio recorder just for fun. I always like to do that, just in case. And within 45 minutes of that audio recorder being set up, we heard these, we didn't hear them because we were sleeping at that point, but there were a bunch of wood knocks and things like that, even a possible grunt, which is just unusual. And I didn't actually review that audio until months later. I was talking to another friend of mine who is a Bigfoot Field Researchers Organization investigator. We happened to bring up this area, and he said, "Oh, well, I worked a case out there." I'm like, "What do you mean? Like, where was this location?" And he tells me the location of where this property owner was having stuff happen. And turns out that house that he went to, that property, is geographically the closest house, period, to where we had some of this stuff happen. All three of these instances I'm talking about that I've had happen to me, like like if I was to hike from where we were camping, the first house I would hit would be this property where this guy describes stuff going back years, hearing weird noises, something kind of following him that had a wet dog smell. He claimed to have seen one of these things, footprints, the weird orb, and then the rock thrown at the screen in front of his face. And he was actually featured then in my first ever Beyond the Trail episode, Granite State Bigfoot case. That interview with him is in there. So that's that area, and I recap a lot of the stuff I just told you about here. So yeah, man, it's a weird area, but that's some of that New Hampshire stuff. There's a lot of good stories from New Hampshire for sure.
For like the area where blank.
What was that?
All right. Do you ever come across like caves and stuff like that? Do you ever get into cave systems at all?
Just a little bit, not a whole lot. Down in West Virginia, we did some cave exploration when we were down there in the Monongahela National Forest, which is like the eastern third of West Virginia, which is fantastic habitat. A lot of great Sasquatch reports from that area. We went to this one cave and it was crazy. I mean, I've been to a couple of caves in West Virginia, and I've been to some of the ones in like Virginia and other places that are touristy. Like you go down in there and it's all, we even went to a tourist cave. This was last summer. It was like smoke hole caverns or something like that. And, it's like they used to use it for smuggling back in the day, and the history of the Civil War, all kinds of weird stuff happened in these caves. But this was a cave we went to that was in this town, and and once you go in there, you crawl in, and then it kind of opens up into these big rooms, and there was a river flowing through it too, and we were walking in the river going into the cave, and we didn't have like a map or anything, so we didn't want to go too far in. There were three of us, and it was different passages, and it was incredible. And I thought, oh my God, this is crazy, right? We don't get those kinds of caves up here in New England, even though this is all part of the same mountain chain. So if you go from Georgia to Maine, I mean, it's all the Appalachian Mountains. But once you get up past Pennsylvania, so into the Adirondacks, into the Green Mountains, the White Mountains, and then into Maine, you have a lot more granite. There's not as much of that limestone. least from what I understand, that is responsible for a lot of those incredible cave systems down south. I mean, I went to the Mammoth Cave last year in Kentucky when I was down there. And I mean, it's like you could fit a subway down there. I mean, we're talking hundreds of feet high cave walls, incredible. And it's one of the largest cave systems on planet Earth down there. All underneath the state of Kentucky, it's basically caves. Same thing with West Virginia. I think there's like 6,000 known caves in West Virginia. So just that little exploration we've done, I enjoy them. They're very cool, but they're creepy. And if it gets too tight of a squeeze, I won't do it. I don't like, the extreme claustrophobia. You just see some of that stuff. You don't want to get stuck down in there, right? So absolutely crazy kind of environments. But yeah, caves have a lot of weird history to them. I don't know if Sasquatch creatures would use caves. I would imagine if they did, it would probably just be temporarily, or caves that might be out of sight, because there's definitely caves we haven't found throughout even the Appalachian Mountains that are just side of a mountainside that maybe no one's been to, right? So maybe they'll use it for a place to get away for a little bit, but I don't think, like some people have suggested, maybe they use caves to move from one place to another. But primates aren't really known for having really good eyesight. So even like if you have great night vision and you're out in the woods, you like animals that have eye shine, tapetum lucidum, they're reflecting what little light is available in the environment from their eyes. It's like with a cat, when you shine a light at them, you can see their eyes glowing. They use what little light they have, and they can see pretty well. But I mean, whatever Sasquatch is, would it be traveling through caves? I mean, I guess it's possible, but I imagine if these things are flesh and blood, then that would be a way to get stuck. You could get stuck or trapped. So that might not be a great idea, but I could definitely see them utilizing them. I mean, we know throughout history, Neanderthals, humans, different primates, I mean, Gigantopithecus, some of these large apes, like Gigantopithecus fossils were discovered in some of these caves. Now that could be because porcupines dragged the bones in, but we know like Neanderthals, cavemen, that's a whole kind of a topic that people like to talk about. We as apes, humans as apes, and many of our relative apes have used caves for centuries as a way to just get away from the conditions. So I don't imagine why one wouldn't use it, maybe if it was out of necessity, but I don't think they reside in caves all the time. I mean, it doesn't seem like they really need to.
When I first heard people saying that they might use the cave systems to go from place to place and stuff, I was like, wouldn't they? I mean, they're humongous. Wouldn't they get stuck?
Right.
Like, I'm like, I'm not really big. I'm 5'10". I'm stuck in a cave. So
Same.
an 8 foot 500, 600 pound freaking being, I feel like would be more potential for that. So
yeah,
I like to think of them as like interdimensional, like they use portals more than stuff like that. I don't know. It's an interesting leeway for the Sasquatch story. But I don't really know what you don't know anything,
Yeah, there's a lot of, unfortunately, there's a lot more questions there are answers, and most of the evidence encounters we have are obviously anecdotal, so they're what people have seen and described, and there are physical examples of evidence, but nothing that's conclusively that we know of can prove Sasquatch. So that's the question of, that's where a lot of different interpretations come in. Is it flesh and blood? Is it more paranormal? Some people think it's alien. Some people think they're an ancient species and they telepathically communicate. I mean, there's almost as many different descriptions of Sasquatch theories. There's so many of them. It depends which. That's why there's so many camps, right? There's those that think it's even within flesh and blood that disagree. They're just feral human-like creatures, or no, they are Gigantopithecus descendants. No, they're Paranthropus descendants. And these guys are disagreeing, and then they disagree with the people who think it's paranormal, whereas the paranormal people, some of them are saying, well, they're Nephilim, depending if they have more of a religious worldview. They're fallen angels, they're Nephilim, they're actually interdimensional, they are aliens, they're star people, right? They're forest protectors. Like, there's so many different interpretations. I think it really depends on which way you look at it. But I think personally the precedent at least behaviorally, through some of the most credible anecdotal encounters. And again, those really fascinating parallels with ape behavior can't be ignored. I mean, even if, let's say, these things are paranormal, that is still, there's still a weird parallel going on there. So, I mean, the precedent is there for some sort of an undiscovered or just undocumented primate-like creature, whether it's a hominid or a hominin. That's obviously a question. I don't know, but it could be totally something weirder than that. We're all wrong, those of us that think it's flesh and blood. So I don't know. I mean, there's very little we actually do know. I just know that there is some sort of weird phenomena going on out there, whether it's all in our heads or if it's an actual being. There's something going on. I mean, people are for some reason reporting this kind of stuff all over the place.
Now you might have mentioned it in the beginning, but so I apologize if you did for asking. But what's your next expedition? Like, what are you working on next?
So right now I'm working on a lot of that Alaska stuff. So I spent a month in Alaska over the summer, kind of a month and a half between, because I drove up there from New Hampshire and back. That was probably the craziest trip I've ever been on, just the amount of driving, and incredible seeing the whole continent. You realize how much space there is, how ridiculous North America actually is. I mean, it's scary how much space there is out there. Really, so remote. I mean, it's just crazy. So I'm working through a lot of that sort of Alaska stuff. But my next kind of expeditions, I have a potential New Hampshire expedition coming up. I have a cool opportunity with some stuff in northern New Hampshire. Actually, I have something I've been really hoping to cover for a while, an area that I love to go to, don't go to nearly enough because it's pretty far away, but up in Coos County, New Hampshire, which borders western Maine. You've got the stories of the wood devils up there, really interesting Sasquatch-like stories that go back to the days of the logging up there. Really, and I've personally taken some reports from up there, taken quite a number of reports from New Hampshire, but from Coos County as well, even right up to the Canadian border in that area. So I want to do some stuff on that because I think that area is absolutely underrated, but it's an area teeming with moose, just like most of Maine is. And that part of northern New Hampshire is very sparsely populated. There's a lot of logging land up there. So there's some cool stuff. And then going forward after that, probably be doing some stuff in Kentucky at some point here towards the end of the year. And then all the plans for next year have yet to be made. So I know I'd like to return to Florida to look for the skunk ape, as well as plenty of other adventures. So at this point, just kind of working on a lot of that stuff that I have from Alaska and Canada and starting to plan some of the local stuff.
So this is a question that I try to ask everybody. Sometimes I forget it. But I've asked most people, but are you finding fulfillment in everything that you're doing?
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, if somebody was to tell me 4 or 5 years ago when I was miserable and working a job that I absolutely did not like and did not want to be in, that, hey, in a few years from now, you're going to be doing something you really enjoy doing and getting to travel to some of these incredible places, meet so many incredible people, and visit some of the most beautiful places on planet Earth, I would have said, I don't know. Because that was a goal. I wanted to get to this point back then, but I just, it's so hard in the moment to try to imagine being in that position, right? Because there's always, I've got to do this, or I've got to do that. And then I'm so tired, I barely have enough time to do my passion projects, right? So absolutely, I definitely feel fulfillment, and I'm thankful every day for being able to do what I get to do. And, for something like Small Town Monsters existing, obviously we love what we do. I think all of us at Small Town Monsters, we really care about the subjects. We take it seriously. And it's really cool as I get to create the documentaries that I want to cover. So I think I talked about at the beginning, doing these topics that, cases like my personal, like I told you about that encounter with that being, the feeling of being watched. And that case, that was something that I started, well 2 years before I ever thought of doing it as a series for Small Town Monsters. And when we created the concept for the Beyond the Trail series, it was like, hey, these are basically do what you want kind of thing. And it's like, well, I get to talk about all these personal cases and then all these bucket list items and places I've wanted to go to: Alaska, Bluff Creek, Northern California, Oregon, Washington, Colorado, Florida. I mean, you name it, right? British Columbia. So it's really cool. Absolutely. I definitely feel fulfillment. I think that's a really cool question, and definitely a good one to ask people in this, in these kind of weird topics, because if you don't like what you're doing, obviously it's no fun. But I don't think I'd be as willing to talk to you on a podcast about it if I didn't like it, right? I'd probably be like, no, I don't want to talk about it at all.
Yeah, so I enjoy your content, so I hope that you continue for as long as you possibly can, because just your knowledge on a lot of these topics, whether it's the land and the area or animals, like your knowledge is vast, and I'm super impressed with it. So I really appreciate you actually coming on. It's funny, like I was saying earlier, and I was talking to Heather Mosier, and she was just like, "Oh, well, Alex is, a part of the small town monsters." I was like, "No way, looking at his stuff."
That's so cool. I appreciate it. Thank you, man. It's like I said, it's fun. I think it's really important, especially when you're looking into a topic, to look at all the different angles, look at the different perspectives that people have. I spent time with Native American tribes. They have a very spiritual way of viewing the Sasquatch. It's connected with their worldview and how they came into being, right? Whereas if you talk to somebody who's much more, let's say, a Christian perspective, they have a way that maybe Sasquatch fits into their worldview. Whereas somebody who's a hardcore science atheist kind of person, they have a way that Sasquatch might fit into their worldview. So I think just knowing about those natural areas too, learn about the other critters that live in those areas, educate yourself when you're out in the woods, so that next time you hear that weird cry, you can say, well, that's a barred owl, that's not a Sasquatch. Because a lot of people hear bird sounds and think it's Sasquatch, and it's all a learning experience. But like I said, it's always fun to talk about these and share these topics, because I'm passionate about it. So it's really cool to see other people that are passionate about it, and always a fun time to talk.
You coming on, but if you don't mind, just letting everybody know where it is that they can find you one more time.
Absolutely. Best place to probably find all my stuff is my website, petakovmedia.com. That's PETAKOV media.com. It's got links to all the series and all the other stuff, and my email and social media on there. So if I get a lot of people to reach out to me by email or like Instagram, like yourself. So feel free to message me on those platforms. I usually try to get back to people. I love getting reports. I've gotten a ton of reports that way, which is cool for me. I'm able to then follow up on that report afterwards and talk to the person, hear them out, see if I think they're credible or not. Because there are some people that try to pull fake stuff, but Petakov Media is a great place to contact me, or just see any of my stuff. Otherwise, just search Small Town Monsters on Google or YouTube. You're bound to find some work by me on YouTube. There obviously are other creators as well on the channel, but we all have fun sort of creating our own different takes on these topics. But thank you for having me on, man. Awesome to talk to a fellow New Englander neighbor in Maine. So Maine's an awesome state. I'd like to spend more time up there. I've obviously been up to the Cryptozoology Museum, and we've done a couple Maine expeditions, but man, those North Maine woods are gnarly. And I love any time I get to go up there. Katahdin, anywhere north of there, great place.
I would love to hike Katahdin someday soon. My kids and I are actually going to Mount Washington this coming weekend, so that should be fun. It's kind of like an annual thing for us.
Oh, cool. I love Mount Washington.
Yeah, oh my God, it's so gorgeous.
The White Mountains are great. Yeah, I've hiked all the 48 4,000 footers in New Hampshire a few years ago. I hiked all of those, and I'm hoping to do the New England 67, because I've got to do just the peaks in Maine and then the ones in Vermont. But Katahdin is definitely on my list. That's a really, really cool area. Beautiful up there.
Listen, I appreciate you. Please check out Alex with Small Town Monsters and all of their stuff. The Beyond the Trail of YouTube. Sasquatch Beyond the Trail, and or Bigfoot Beyond the Trail. I think that's what it's called. If you don't mind, please like, follow, share, subscribe, do all that stuff. Leave a rating if you like. Also, a review would be fantastic. I don't mind negative reviews because it doesn't bother me. But if you're in the mood to write a review, I would appreciate it. And you can follow me at _the_weird_ones are on Instagram. If you want to be featured on the show, talk about Bigfoot, talk about paranormal experiences, whatever falls in the category of weird, email me at wheretheweirdonесare@gmail.com. Other than that, get my Etsy, etsy.com/shop/wheretheweirdonесare for the merch. But yeah, I hope you guys have a good day. Hope you have a good night, whatever time you decide to listen to this. Question everything. It's still weird.
This concludes our broadcast day. Click.
Because in the end, none of us have very long on this earth. Life is fleeting. And if you're ever distressed, cast your eyes to the summer sky, when the stars are strung across the velvety night, and when a shooting star streaks through the blackness, turning night into day. Make a wish.